Today on Collider Sports Time, there's some tampering in the NBA free agency, possibly. We got some greatest sports what-ifs. We're talking about USC and that Reggie Bush lateral. And hey, the Pittsburgh Steelers, they've actually lost some Super Bowls. We're going to talk about all of that here today on Collider Sports Time on the greatest sports what-ifs. Yes. I am your host, John Roca. Welcome, everyone, to this live episode of Collider Sports Time. I always appreciate you taking the Friday to hang with us and shoot the crap about sports. It's always awesome to have you along. I can't do it alone, you know that, so I brought along the wild man himself, the man who pushed me into the ground, Josh McCouga. How are you?
John, how's your knee? I apologize. It's been a while since I've been on the show. I never thought I'd be asked back because of last week's incident in a virtual reality game where I may have shattered John Roca's legs. He's made of balsa wood, ladies and gentlemen.
It's no lie. That's why we didn't have a live show last week, because I had tore my ACL, my LCL, my MCL, my ZCL, my YCL, basically all my LCLs. All CLs inside me. And of course, another guy who's a bit of a smartass himself. Hi, Jeff Snyder.
Hello, Mr. Roca. Thank you for having me. Josh, don't touch me. I'm very litigious.
Congratulations. Your shirt's also a little too deep for...
You like that? You like that deep?
That's bright.
That's a deep cut.
Look at that. That is
John Roca.
Did you get that at the pajama store? Did you buy that at like an
I do
actual
feel
store?
very comfortable right now.
I was gonna say, because you're also wearing like sweatpants under there or something.
Sweatpants.
Yeah.
These are a seersucker.
They say juicy on them. That's the uncomfortable
They do look
thing
a little
about those.
seersucker.
About
Please.
those
You
sweatpants.
look like a cross between you just woke up and Cape Cod like local.
This is very chic, I'll have you know. I'm the thinking man sports fan.
Well, to be fair, it's hot AF in
Yeah, we're in
Burbank today.
Burbank.
So all of us are wearing short sleeve here. I'm wearing one of these polos myself. Let's jump into the first subject today, and that's the NBA free agency. There are some possible tampering allegations being investigated here by Adam Silver, who is the commissioner of the NBA. This comes on the heels of one of the most frenzied periods of free agency that we have ever seen in the history of the NBA. So many superstars switching teams, so many superstars at 12:01 of the time the free agency begins already signed with another team. So apparently Adam Silver got a lot of guff from these owners at a recent meeting, and when he tried to keep them at bay, they pressured him and pushed him, and now this investigation is happening. One of those owners is Michael Jordan for the Charlotte Hornets, a man who played for one team his entire career. So maybe this is a little bit old school versus new school going on here. But Josh,
he played for two teams.
he played for, I don't consider the Wizards.
Oh, you don't?
That never happens. That never effing happened. All right, Josh McCouga, you look at the situation here. A lot of time we had Russell Westbrook leave and go play for the Rockets. We have Kevin Durant going for the Brooklyn Nets. Kyrie Irving leaving the Celtics. A lot of teams, even the smaller players like Thaddeus Young going to the Bulls. A lot of things happened here with this. Do you think this is a legitimate situation here going on, or the owners getting pissed that they didn't have control?
Well, I think it's twofold. One, you have to wait until like whatever date to like start. That's BS. These players talk to each other all the time. They text, they tweet, they gram, they have their own independent social medias that they use together to try and collude and create super teams. We're never going to be able to get rid of that. With how much technology is out there, they'll just keep creating technologies to talk to one another. I think Michael Jordan's just really butthurt because he lost Kemba Walker.
He lost Kemba immediately to Boston.
And that what he's been able to do in Charlotte is legit zero.
Yeah.
He is still a small market team with absolutely no future, no superstars, no team. Michael Jordan's not a very good owner. I think the problem with all of this is they just need to get rid of this whole thing. Get rid of the date, get rid of, you can't talk, you can't sign, just get rid of it. It's not working.
Right.
Instead of looking into tampering, it's like the NCAA. We think that like somebody may have gotten a car. Okay, if you would just let these players make some money, this wouldn't happen. I'm not saying that boosters should come and be like, hey, come and play for us for $1 million. Right. Obviously, there's certain things. But if the players want to sell jerseys or get tattoos for their jerseys, whatever the case may be, it's not affecting play on the field.
Right.
The same thing happens with the NBA. You can't simply control these players. It's now a players' league. The owners have no control over where these guys go.
Yeah.
Because salary caps are basically a thing of the past. If you're willing to pay the luxury tax, you can just go and kind of do whatever you want. Listen, do I get where the owners are coming from? Absolutely, because 32, like 26 of the 32 teams got totally snubbed in this whole thing.
Yeah, and I think you bring up a great point. That's the thing, that the owners themselves, they don't like it. Look, they paid billions of dollars, or at least hundreds of millions of dollars for these teams, and they don't like the fact that players are the ones deciding where they want to play. Look at Anthony Davis breaking that contract so that he could go be with the Lakers. They're losing power within the league themselves, so they don't like that the players are now telling them who they want and don't want to play for. And some of the things here, Jeff, let me get your opinion on this. Kawhi Leonard is one of the big, and this is all coming from ESPN and the New York Times. Kawhi Leonard apparently had his representatives arranging the blockbuster move from the Raptors. He asked for perks that would violate the league's collective bargaining agreement. Stephen A. Smith said people in NBA circles, quote unquote, said that Leonard's uncle, known as Uncle Dennis, had asked other teams for houses, planes, and guaranteed sponsorship money. Smith added he had no idea if it was true or not. But you hear all this, Jeff. This feels like the NCAA stuff somehow occurring in the pro leagues.
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me at all. Everyone will do whatever they can in the big leagues for that competitive advantage. I mean, teams are only allowed to give so much money on under these contracts. Of course, if you're Uncle Dennis, you're going to be like, all right, well, give me the max contract, but can you throw in a house? Can you throw in a car or a plane or a tank or who knows what the hell else these guys have access to? So I'm not surprised that he's asking for it, because I'm sure he's not the first one.
Yeah.
Hey, John, it's me, Uncle Dennis. Was hoping, listen, I know you guys want Kawhi, but I've got a couple other requests. I would like a tailored suit every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. I'd also like a plane to take me to the Chick-fil-A that's only open on Sunday, one in the entire country.
What do you think? It's like, what do you think Quentin Tarantino was doing when he was shopping Once Upon a Time in Hollywood? Sony, they just acquiesced to the demands.
Yeah.
And I think that the pendulum of power has swung almost too far to the players, but they might argue it hasn't swung far enough. That movie High Flying Bird. Did you see that, John?
Yeah,
on
great
Netflix?
film with my friend Andre Holland.
Yeah, we could have a time where the players realize we don't need these owners. We don't need these big arenas that they own. All we need, we are the attraction, and if we show up on a court outside, we can bring in top dollar,
right,
and own it.
The NBA is the only league that we have currently in professional sports where the players are way, way bigger than the teams will ever be.
Yes.
And the only
across the board,
and it really goes
to
to the point where the NFL has 50 guys on a squad, 52 guys on a squad, right? Baseball has 25, 26, something like that, depending on bullpens and whatever. Hockey, same thing, 23 guys, 22 guys, whatever. You legitimately have 10. You have 5 to 7 guys that are playing regular minutes, and you have 2 to 3 superstars. Their faces aren't covered by helmets or face masks. They are constantly getting shoe deals. Everything in the NBA is sellable. Jerseys are worn everywhere. Shoes are worn everywhere. They make millions outside of it because these guys are so front and center with their faces all of the time, and they are on the court the entire game.
And also, there's only 30 or so superstars. So while in your head you might think, oh, that's great, we'll want a team. It's not like that anymore, because they're teaming up. And when you have 2 or 3 superstars on teams these days, the disparity in the league is going to be so top heavy on one half.
It already kind of is. In the last couple of years, if Kevin Durant doesn't tear his Achilles, Golden State wins another title.
Yeah.
I mean, simply because he stepped on the court.
Well, this all stems from the Kawhi Leonard stuff, because apparently he was trying to recruit Durant before he got Paul George to come to the Clippers. Imagine that situation. So you're not supposed to be talking to these people, but certainly Ballmer and the Clippers pulled something to make this happen. Sean Marks, the GM for the Nets, said at NBA Summer League that Durant had committed on Instagram before ever meeting with the teams. That's what he claims. But him and Kyrie might have had a conversation.
Totally.
This whole thing, and then you go through intermediaries, and that's how you get around it. So he's considering, he's wondering if changes need to be made. Maybe they move free agency to before the NBA draft, so it's something where you can factor in picks ahead of time and things of that nature.
I did feel like I listened to Simmons' podcast this week, and it's like the free agency did start before the draft. It just wasn't official.
Right, it wasn't official. Yeah, exactly.
We already knew by draft night what was going on.
Yeah.
The NBA is the only league where you are talking about the postseason pretty much the entire regular season, or the off season, during the entire regular season and playoffs. Where is they going to be next year? What are they going to do with this contract? What are they going to do? I personally find it frustrating, and I would find it frustrating as a fan of a team, knowing full well that, listen, if I'm a Lakers fan, this might be my only year with Anthony Davis.
Yeah.
And to be honest with you, besides LeBron, Anthony Davis, and Kyle Kuzma, the team is just a shell of players.
Yeah, it's an interesting team they're putting together there. But Josh, you make a bigger point, and that's this whole situation of how can fans love players on a team, knowing that at any moment those players can be like, you know what, I don't want to play with you anymore. I'm going to go play with my friend across the country and get into a bigger franchise, a marquee franchise, so I can take care of my brand and sell my merchandise. That makes fans not want to cheer for the team or show up for the games. That's a possibility too.
And you can, in the NBA, it's a brutal situation where your team can be a legit contender, and the next year just be out to dry. Look at Toronto without Kawhi. I mean, they're like a 7 or a 6 seed.
Right. Look who's watching Indiana Memphis when you can watch the Lakers versus the Celtics or the Nets down the road.
The league has kind of always been like that, right? Like you're not. I mean,
it's been top heavy.
It's always been sort of top heavy, and that is a big issue, right? The greatest league in our nation right now is the NFL, because on any given weekend, any team can win. Look. Yes, there are perennial losers like the Detroit Lions, Cleveland Browns. I mean, the season could be
used to be LA Clippers.
Used to be LA Clippers. I'm Steve Ballmer, and I live in a van down by the river that is also a multi-billion-dollar sports complex. But what you have in the NFL is you have parity, and they've created that with a salary cap. Baseball did away with it a long time ago, and now players like Bryce Harper are getting $300 million contracts, and teams like the Pittsburgh Pirates will never win. And that is a shame, because there are cities out there that love their baseball teams that will never win a World Series. What happened with the Kansas City Royals a couple years ago, that happens once every 30 plus years.
Yeah.
And the same in the NBA. You're going to have flare-ups with teams like the
Toronto.
Memphis Grizzlies or Toronto, or a team like the Denver Nuggets, who we seem to bring up on this show all the time. But what you're getting in the NBA now, unfortunately, is you're just getting this carousel of superstar players transferring from team to team. I mean, would I want, if I was a Golden State Warriors fan, would I want Clay and Steph to play on my team forever? Yes, but I don't think that's going to happen.
No,
I don't think we're ever
no
going to see
loyalty.
that again.
There's no loyalty anymore. I don't think there's even as much loyalty among fans. Like, fans will now travel with the player. Exactly.
Yeah, and I'm not gonna lie. I with LeBron, I used to go with him after he left the Cavaliers from team to team. But when he pulled what he did with the Lakers, I was like, I don't know if I 100% want to go down that route with him. So yeah, that's the thing that comes into play here is how much are you affecting the fans? And I'm sure this governor's board meeting they had with the owners were really clear to Silver. You got to do something, Aaron. And Silver said, the quote, "The one strong conviction I have is that we should not have rules that are not strictly enforced." We know that's the case right now, whether that's by virtue of practice, whether it's because just the world around us has changed, whether it's because players have power that they didn't used to have. I'm not so sure, which implies that he's going to investigate this thing. And to wrap this up real quick, who else would be on the losing side of this whole situation but the Knicks? Because apparently Bobby Portis told The Athletic, which is a great website. I signed up for a year. There's great writers on that website. Apparently the Knicks reached out to set up a meeting with him a full 5 days before free agency began, which is in essence pseudo-tampering. So wouldn't you know, wouldn't the Knicks be the ones that get screwed over in this whole situation, not the bigger teams, the bigger stars? Wouldn't you know it? All right. Well, that's it. We'll see what happens. We'll keep our eyes on this story as the NBA season, if you can believe it, opens soon. All over again, but first college football and first NFL. And speaking of that, we're going to jump in today with a special stuff because not much was going on in the world of sports. So I thought this would be fun to get our panelists to come on and talk about their greatest sports what ifs. And one of the people that I know I wanted to get from the Collider offices to come onto the set to talk about his greatest sports what if. We're going to ask Jeff Snyder to step out. We'll get back to Jeff in just a second. He's got a great sports what if. We're going to bring in Mark Riley. There he is. Mark Riley.
Happy to be here, guys.
Riley, the one thing you want to talk about, and I was just bringing this up casually in the office about doing those greatest sports with us, and you immediately chimed in and said, Reggie Bush in that lateral in the 2005 National Championship against Texas. So, Mark Riley, you're a USC fan. I see you there with that hat.
I am.
Please don't pound the desk, Mark.
Yeah.
Josh McCouga, you be quiet for a second.
Okay, sure, got it.
Listen, the 2005 championship game between USC and Texas is one of the greatest games of all time.
Maybe the greatest game all time.
Maybe the greatest game all time. It would have been the greatest game all time had USC won. All right? Because it's not the greatest of all time. And a lot of people look at that game and say, what if on 4th and 5, we stopped Vince Young from going into the corner end zone to put the game away in the fourth quarter? However, We had some bad corners. We had some poor coaching calls on that moment. We had some corners that switched team. We had a veteran that wasn't on the right side when Vince Young went in. But we would have never been in that situation had we, in the second quarter, Reggie Bush didn't lateral a ball to put the game out of reach. This is what happened. We were up by 7 points. 7 points. Texas, muffs a punt. We get the ball back. We could have gone up by 14. Now, in games like this, momentum is everything. Texas would have been back on their heels. We would have probably gotten the ball back. We could have gone up by 21 points leading into halftime. But what happens? Reggie Bush catches a ball midfield, breaks out into the open, and he's going and he's going. And what I found out is he's talking to another wide receiver who's a great blocker when stuff like this happens, Chris McFoy. And he wasn't in the game at that time. There was another player in there, and Reggie Bush didn't know. So he's running and running, and he sees it right here. I've always been saying that this is just a highlight reel for Reggie Bush. That he's like, oh, I just want to look good. He won the Heisman Trophy that year. And he tries to toss it, and the guy's like, huh? And it drops on the ground. They get the ball back, and they go back and score and tie the game up. But that, if we were going to be down on like the 10-yard line, easily set up either a field goal or go in for a touchdown. And I think that would have made the biggest difference of the game, and that one in particular.
I think, a totally deflating situation, obviously. Again, I agree to your point of Reggie Bush being cocky, thinking that
he was.
Let me just throw. This is the national championship. Let me toss a lateral here, and we'll definitely go in for a touchdown.
Three defenders holding him too. It was a bad move to make. He shouldn't have done
down. I think the other thing too, in a game like that, which was in the second half, just touchdown. It was a flip flop of a game.
It was
a two touchdown lead is the difference in the game.
Yes.
A similar thing happened to me when my Penn State Nittany Lions played your USC Trojans in a Rose Bowl a few years back.
That's
2 years ago, I believe.
Yeah,
maybe 3, something like that. Because we were up 2 scores, and then it started becoming this back and forth, and then all of a sudden Penn State threw a pick, and then that was the ball game, because then it became a 1-score game, and that was over.
Yeah,
that was that.
That's it. I mean, especially that game, there was a lot of nerves happening. They went scoreless in the first possession. Texas did as well, and then when we finally get that, Matt Leinart puts a perfect pass. Helmet to helmet hit on the receiver. I can't remember his name, but he does get in for the first score.
Right.
And then we get the ball back. I mean, that is the thing. And we were just moving down the field. And Reggie Bush, what are you doing? I know he was practicing with McFoy. And he said, I know we could do this. But then McFoy was pulled out of the game, so he wasn't even there. He was sitting there watching.
Told Pete Carroll.
He should have told Pete Carroll.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yep.
He shouldn't have done it in the first place.
I agree.
Not with 3 defenders all holding him. He should have gone down. We would have been set up in excellent field position. It would have changed the game, in my opinion.
I think you make a great point. It was one of those rare occurrences when it was small balls, Pete, and he didn't quite get it done in that situation.
Right.
But I think it's also a direct result of having a coach with that kind of confidence / arrogance in the mind of Reggie Bush. Remember, they got away with that push with Leinart against Notre Dame.
The Bush push,
The Bush push. Everybody remembers that. But
Love that push.
The lateral is just hubris. It is hubris in that situation. Maybe because Texas did look like they were on their heels. They were nervous. It's a national championship game. Vince Young basically carried that team to the victory. It was not like all these incredible players and great coaching from.
It was only Vince Young.
Yeah.
He was phenomenal in that game.
Yep.
And all we had to do was stop him. It was 4th down and 5. And that bad coaching, I'm sorry, Pete Carroll, but that bad coaching where they took a veteran cornerback that was covering Vince Young on the right side, and then another coach, it wasn't Carroll, it was defensive, moved him to the other side, leaving a freshman cornerback that was just put in the game, who was like, huh? What do I do? And Vince Young took advantage of it because he is a great player. Let's call it what it is. And he put the game away. It was a dagger in my heart. I'm still hurting now.
Let me ask you a question. I know that you're a huge USC fan.
Yeah.
And I've always wanted to, every time I meet a player, I try and warm up a little bit, whatever, and then ask him, do you remember this? Because I sure as F do.
Yeah.
Right? And we're going to bring it up later on.
Yeah.
Now, Mark, when I look back at that national championship game, because as an outside perspective, no dog in the race, no dog in the hunt, no horse in the race, whatever you want to call it. I was rooting for USC because I love to see dynasties keep winning. I know a lot of people root for underdogs or whatever.
I was very much a Texas fan.
It would have been a third in a row. I know it was LSU kind of shared it the first one. Yeah. We undisputed against Oklahoma the year before. But I'm with you. Go.
And I love rooting for dynasties. I know that's probably not the most popular way of doing sports, but it is what it is. I think that might have been the worst coached game for Pete Carroll outside of what could have been another what if for you of not running Marshawn Lynch against the Patriots and throwing a pass instead.
Right. Another mistake.
Another Pete Carroll mistake.
On the goal line.
I couldn't agree with you more. There was a lot of bad calls on there. I mean, putting in some freshmen, like I mentioned with Vince Young, putting in a freshman cornerback in the national championship game when the game is on the line is a bad call.
Yeah.
That is a bad call when you have a veteran cornerback that they move to the other side of the field.
Yeah. I mean, nobody had an answer for Vince Young that entire season, but you had 3.5 weeks to prep for Vince Young. You could have put the amount of defensive talent you had on that squad it was insane.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a top 2 and 3 defense and a top 1 offense. It was crazy.
Absolutely. And I don't know how much leverage they were giving to Reggie Bush at the time, because Reggie Bush and McFoy were practicing this just for giggles, which I never understood. It's like, you got to run that through your coach. And if the coach is letting him, I know Pete Carroll is like sunshine and gummy bears. He loves to just run around and have fun. And he's like, rah, 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 let's go. And he's infectious. And that can help, and it absolutely helped. But this is the problem. I don't think he knew this was happening, so you're letting Reggie Bush do this thing that really affected the game, in my opinion.
And they have a shot of Pete when it happens as a like, oh no, what have you done? It was not planned in any way, shape, or form. But sure, it would have been interesting to see. Certainly Vince Young wouldn't have been as heralded coming into the NFL with that national championship on his belt, which really he didn't do much in the NFL aside from maybe 1 year or 2 years for Tennessee.
Tennessee Titans.
A couple of years in Tennessee.
He had a decent run,
and then he just fell off the thing. But Reggie had his own troubles handing back that Heisman Trophy and then also kind of flaming out. He did get a Super Bowl ring, but he certainly flamed out in the NFL. So
he sure did.
A lot of interesting things.
Both guys injury prone. Both stars injury prone. I don't want to go crazy here, but I think that national championship game is the reason that Vince Young went so high in the draft.
Yes,
I think before that.
Oh,
are you kidding?
Absolutely.
I think he's a second-round pick.
Yes.
After that national championship, he is a top-tier quarterback. I mean, what do you go, 3 overall, 4 overall, something crazy like that?
Well, Vince Young, too, had a chip on his shoulder walking into that game because, Heisman Trophy, he was up for it as well, and it did go to Reggie Bush, but, in the year before with Matt Leinart. So it was like a 2-year thing for the Trojans, but he came in hot, and and you said it, Rocha, he was the difference in that game. It was only him. It was a star-making performance.
But without that lateral, maybe he doesn't get a chance to be that star, and that's what makes a great sports what if. It's like this one moment in the game. It's the second quarter, but it's the second quarter, and you're up by 7. You're at home essentially in the Rose Bowl.
Exactly.
And you're playing all those USC fans, and Texas has never been a national championship. You're going for your 3rd, and Texas is a little nervous, not really as strong of a team, and somehow they found that confidence as an underdog to get the job done. I think it all begins with that lateral. So it's a great sports what if.
It was such a great game. I know we lost, but it was also just the theatrics of it, having Will Ferrell and Matthew McConaughey at the beginning trade barbs. I mean, it was prime time at that point. It was unbelievable because USC was a dynasty in the making. 2 in a row. Is that a dynasty? 3
it's in the making.
In college. In college,
right,
it's so hard to do.
Yeah.
And that was the one thing I really wanted. I'm with you, but when it's your team going for a 3rd in a row,
this was pre-Saban Alabama.
Yeah, exactly. So
Yeah,
I get that feeling. I know what you're like. Well, thanks, Mark, for stopping by to talk about that.
Guys.
What if.
That was fun.
Love it.
Thank
That was
you.
awesome. Let's bring back Jeff Snyder, and while he's getting back on the set, let's get to you fans here talking about your greatest sports what ifs. Star Drew says, "Ask Makuga what if Dallas had caught that ball to tie the Steelers in 1979?
The Jackie Smith.
What if the Seahawks had just ran Marshall Lynch to win back-to-back Super Bowls? What if Bo Jackson hadn't got hurt in the 1990 AFC playoffs that ended his football career?
Are they trying to tear at my heartstrings? Bo Jackson's my favorite athlete all time."
Jenna James says, "What if the refs didn't screw Des Bryant in Green Bay?"
That's
a lot of people saying USC shouldn't have even been there because of the Bush push, which I think is very funny. What if Jimmy Johnson stayed with the Cowboys after the '93 season? That's from Punch Drunk Savage.
That's a Dallas Cowboys I'm sure there's people talking about it today in Dallas.
Yep.
People talk about that all of the time.
Jonathan Peck says, and this is one we're going to get to, what if Joe Gibbs and the Redskins had called a run play, not that rocket screen with 12 seconds left before halftime, Super Bowl 18? Maybe Redskins repeat as Super Bowl champions. Certainly possible because the Raiders were underdogs. The Raiders were certainly underdogs. Right. Yeah. We welcome back Jeff to the show, and let's move forward with our next what if, and that is Josh McCouga taking this one.
Me.
Hey, the Pittsburgh Steelers, hey, we know them as 6-time Super Bowl champions, but imagine a world where they are 8-time Super Bowl champions and in essence the number one franchise in the NFL, superseding the Patriots, for God's sakes. It could have been possible if they had won Super Bowl 30 and Super Bowl 45. They lost to the Cowboys and the Packers respectively. Josh McCouga, what are your what ifs when it comes to these two Super Bowls with the Steelers?
John, what a world it would be, my friend. 8-time Super Bowl champions, the city of Pittsburgh, the city of champions, black and gold, black and yellow, whatever color choice that may be, John. The greatest dynasty in the history of the league? I certainly think so. Now, I think that the Patriots dynasty right now is quite impressive, but it's led by one man and a rotating cavalcade of people that are decent football players.
Yep.
The Pittsburgh Steelers during the 70s were hands down the greatest dynasty in sports, and if you disagree, you can come at me, bro, as the millennials say. Now, in Super Bowl 30, the Steelers, that once beautiful dynasty of the 70s, was trounced by the likes of people like Mark Malone, Bubby Brister, Kent Graham. We hadn't seen Cordell Stewart yet, but we had a young whippersnapper who was also somehow a 48-year-old man that was 27. I don't know. Neil O'Donnell is the oldest-looking young person of all time. Lead us into Super Bowl 30. Tempe, Arizona against the Dallas Cowboys, led by Barry Switzer.
Yep. The Swits.
Now, Emmitt Smith was the leading rusher of the team, John, and his first play from scrimmage ran the ball 18 yards up the middle, and that's when the city of Pittsburgh deflated. Do you know how many yards he rushed for afterwards, John?
I do not. How many?
18 total.
Oh.
On 20 carries.
That was it?
That was it. Emmitt Smith was stopped dead by a stout Pittsburgh defense led by Levon Kirkland, Greg Lloyd, and Kevin Green.
I remember Greg Lloyd.
Now, the other hand, we had a offense of bunch of morons, excluding Jerome Bettis.
The bus.
Now the bus, he was a young bus. Okay, first year with the squad. We had Yancey Thigpen.
He was the short bus.
He was a short bus
at that time.
This is incredible. We're recording this, right?
We had Neil O'Donnell at the quarterback. We had lost the previous year to the San Diego Chargers in the AFC Championship and won against one Jim Harbaugh in the Indianapolis Colts in that year's AFC Championship game. We came in. The Cowboys were heavy favorites, Jeff Snyder. Heavy favorites. And in a first half that was dominated by the Dallas Cowboys, the Pittsburgh Steelers put up a decent fight. And going into the second half, we were only down 4 total points. Jeff, 4. We had an onside kick surprised by Bill Cowher. Woo! Bill Cowher going creative. And then all of a sudden, Neil O'Donnell was taking whippets on the sidelines, had no idea who to throw it to, and threw two interceptions, 2 key interceptions to Larry Brown, a man who made millions off that game and was never seen from again. Do you know why, Jeff Snyder? Because Neil O'Donnell was throwing it to nobody. There was no Pittsburgh Steelers receivers anywhere near Larry Brown, which to this day is why I say the MVP of that Super Bowl is Neil O'Donnell for the Dallas Cowboys. We were driving in the fourth quarter, deep in Dallas territory, John. Deep. Jeff Snyder, deep. And there goes Neil O'Donnell, stepping back. Oh, there's Larry Brown. He doesn't play for the Steelers. We lost that game. Jeff Snyder, we lost that game on 2 crucial picks. The next season, Neil O'Donnell went and played for the New York Jets on a multi-million-dollar contract. And guess what? He never saw another playoff game again.
Is this like a monologue that you audition with? This is incredible.
That was fantastic. I remember.
That's my what if, John.
That's a great what if.
He didn't throw the picks.
I have to follow that?
That's a fantastic one to follow.
Let me tell you real quick, too.
There's an epilogue. All right,
this sent a waterfall of McCouga tragedies, okay?
Oh, no.
2 days later, my grandfather, my best friend, died.
Oh, Jesus.
3 days later, my brother totaled the family car and spent the night in the hospital.
Oh my God.
All because Neil O'Donnell threw the football to Larry Brown. My grandfather, who had season tickets to the Steelers for 20 plus years, pulled me aside and said, "That man should rot in hell." That was Neil O'Donnell 2 years. Well, my grandfather had stomach cancer, so we knew he was going to pass away sooner or later. But the family was at the funeral.
Yeah.
At the funeral, we're like, "Man, this is really tough. Your grandfather passed away." That lasted for about 10 seconds to the point where we're like, "Can you believe Neil freaking Donnell? Can you believe that Jagoff threw that through those passes?"
It was a miracle that he even got you all to the Super Bowl. He was
No
a journeyman
shit.
quarterback.
Totally.
Remember they had upset, I think, the Patriots that year. Oh, no, the Colts. They'd upset the Colts.
Colts were heavy favorites coming into Pittsburgh.
Colts
Yep.
were heavy favorites. I remember that. And they upset them to get into the Super Bowl. And the Steelers have always been my second favorite team. I was cheering for them. I remember being in Virginia.
Especially against the Cowboys.
Yeah, especially against the Cowboys. I hate the Cowboys. Again, at a Super Bowl party, it was a massive party. And watching Neil O'Donnell throw both of those interceptions. As soon as the second one, I walked out of the party and drove home. As I knew the game was over.
Hopefully you hadn't been drinking.
No, of course not. That's not. It wasn't my thing.
He was
back
only
then.
38 at that point.
Yeah, right. Do you remember these games at all? Do you remember what happened
No,
in the
and it's
Super Bowl?
actually blowing my mind that you guys can remember like a conference championship game from 25 years ago.
It's a Super Bowl.
What color was the Gatorade bath?
For Cowher in that one, it was green. I remember
Yeah, it
it
was
because his wife was right in front of him, and she got doused with green Gatorade.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah, she was not happy.
Yeah.
You guys have amazing recall. I'm impressed.
Well, speaking of recall, we have to do a little more of a sadder recall, a little sadder what if, and that is recalling Len Bias being the first pick in the NBA draft. I think it was 1986.
Was he the first pick?
He was the first overall pick by the Boston
Yeah,
Celtics.
of the Boston Celtics.
University of Maryland.
Yes, speaking of Neil O'Donnell, University of Maryland as well. He was a University of Maryland quarterback.
Yep.
Len Bias, I grew up in D.C., so to me, in Virginia, D.C., to me, I knew all about Len Bias, watched his games on TV. It was so incredible to watch this man. And when he got picked first overall, it was like one of our own going to a premier franchise like Celtics. As much as I may not have liked the Celtics, I was a Lakers fan at the time. I hated Larry Bird, all those guys at the time. Him going to Boston was like such a great thing for a guy who had fought so hard to get there. Jeff, take us through this.
I was 9 years old when Reggie Lewis collapsed.
Oh, God, I remember that.
He collapsed about 20 feet in front of me.
Wow.
And within 3 months, Reggie Lewis had dropped dead.
Yeah.
He had a heart condition.
Right. He had a heart condition. He was shooting practice hoops. And I just remember being shaken up because when you're 9 years old and these athletes pass away, you think of them as invincible. And I remember them, being told at that time, like, this has actually happened to the Celtics once before.
Yes.
When you were, I don't even know if I was born yet or if I was just a little kid. But Len Bias, was supposed to transform the Celtics team, which was obviously red hot in the 80s, but he was going to add a little bit of youth. The guys were starting to get a little beat up, a little bit older by then. And I'm just like, wow, if the Celtics had Len Bias, what would have changed in the NBA? Like, would the Lakers have had Showtime, or would the Celtics have just owned the Lakers throughout the 80s? Would Len Bias have been the veteran who sort of took over the team when Bird and McHale and Parrish all started to, get too old? Would he have sort of kept Michael Jordan's Bulls or Isaiah Thomas's Pistons from winning championships?
What could they have built around him?
Right. Exactly. So I just always found that what if fascinating as a Celtics fan. Because it's crazy just how, death and drugs sort of rob us of these guys.
From what the reports were, he had not been a drug taker. He was celebrating at a party. His number one overall pick had taken some cocaine. I think he took too much and then OD'd and died. The depression in that area of the country, in the DMV, which is DC, Maryland, Virginia, in that area of the country was overwhelming. People could not believe it.
Right.
And it affected so many people in the sports world because it was the first kind of big young death from drugs that we'd seen pro players, in baseball, older players have that situation. And the NBA had been chock full of that in the 70s. So having this come into the 80s, it also was at the height of the Reagan era with the war on drugs and DARE and all that crap that went through that time. So to see him be the poster child of that was just heartbreaking. And you're right, it changes the entire trajectory of the Celtics. Maybe Larry Bird doesn't play as much, gets to rest a little more with him carrying the load. Maybe the back injury doesn't become worse for Larry. Larry stays in the league longer. All these other teams the Celtics get reinvigorated with this young blood. What could have happened?
What was I don't know, like the line of events that got the Celtics that number 1 overall pick because they were already really good. Because back in the day when the Celtics won,
I think
those
it was
like
a trade.
9
Yeah, it was a trade.
right?
I think they may have even won the finals the year before he
Yeah.
was drafted or something
Yeah.
like that, or been to the finals.
Because
So
back in the day when Red Auerbach was winning like those 12 championships or ever how many
Yeah.
he won with Bill Russell, if you won the championship, you got the number 1 draft pick the next season.
Yeah, it was like
which is a crazy.
it was like
thing to
make it
think
take
about.
it in
Correct.
essence in
Yeah, it was.
basketball
You're right.
with the draft.
Exactly what it was. To the fact where when they got Len Bias, it was such a coup.
Yeah.
Because I mean they were like,
they
holy.
didn't even need him.
They
Yeah.
didn't.
Yeah.
They didn't.
Yeah, yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
they had Robert Parrish. But could you imagine like the twin towers of Len Bias and Robert Parrish
Yeah.
underneath? Like, I mean, it's crazy
Right,
to
with
think about
McHale,
what that
DJ.
Celtics team. And then really and truly, like you said, the downfall of the Celtics in the 90s, like, you know, the Celtics were really an afterthought from about 93, 94.
Right after Reggie Lewis died, they didn't have
Right.
anything until
Nothing.
Antoine Walker and then later Paul Pierce came
Correct.
in.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah,
totally.
yeah, that's true. So those,
Interesting, man.
that's a sad what if, but those are
Yeah.
sometimes those are what happen in sports. Let me read you some more here from the fans before we jump into our next one. Star Drew says, "What if a referee had actually called pass interference on Deion Sanders versus Michael Irvin and made that a game? What if the Dolphins had actually signed Drew Brees and not
Oh, that's
the
a big
Saints?
what
Remember
if.
that
Yeah,
one?
that totally.
My dad. Oh yeah.
What if the Steelers had drafted Dan Marino when they could have instead of Gabe Rivera, who's another linebacker? Steelers drafted Gabe Rivera. They let him go to Miami. Gabe Rivera got in a car accident and never played it down for the Steelers.
Yep, that's another
Yeah.
one. Let's see here. What's another one here? He said, what if Joe Montana didn't get hurt in the 1990 NFC Championship game? The Giants don't win that Super Bowl. It's Montana. He
Yeah.
got destroyed by Leonard Marshall. Here's another one, and this is a great one actually with Jeff on the panel. What if the New York Jets' Mo Lewis doesn't cause internal bleeding to Drew Bledsoe, which begins the reign of Tom Brady?
Oh,
what
man.
would have happened?
That is a pretty remarkable what if.
Right?
I mean, because that was just all about timing. I feel like, if Bledsoe, what if Bledsoe had gotten his job back sooner? You know, if Brady had come out, done well, but like
Couple
it
games.
had been like a small sample size or something.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
Credit to Haskell 420 on that one, but he's got a butt hurt one and says, "What if the Patriots didn't steal and practice the Rams plays before Super Bowl 2000 or 2001?" Another one, what if the tuck rule had never happened? That's actually
It's amazing how many of the Patriots have been on what ifs.
Full of so many what ifs. It's like the
How
Patriots
about what if
in the Schmodown, full of a lot of what ifs.
What if David Tyree doesn't put the ball against his helmet?
Right.
I mean, that's
Could have had 7.
Yep. I like this one from Haskell. What if the New York Knicks didn't trade away draft picks and sign certain players that last 15 years? Oh, we'd still suck. And what if the Blazers had selected Kevin Durant over Greg Oden? That's
Wow.
a great what if because they went 1-2 in that draft with Greg Oden going first to them. All right, let's move on to my what if, and that is what if Dan Snyder, that little SOB, had not bought the Washington Redskins and brought shame to the DC area with his ownership of the team? Wouldn't that have been something? Sam Grossman, the Phoenix Phoenix grocery shop magnate, was in contention to buy the Redskins, had already set up a plan for what coach he was going to bring in. Great stuff he was going to do here for DC, revitalizing that team, possibly even changing the name of the team so he wouldn't deal with that crap. He had been in contention with this thing, but in the end, it was Dan Snyder. We haven't won a Super Bowl since 1991. Dan took over the team in, I think, 92 or 93. What if that had been completely different? I think so many Redskins fans wouldn't be as despondent as we have been over the last 27, 28 years.
I think a lot of that has to do. I mean, yes, Dan is a terrible owner.
Yeah. One of the worst.
Yes, I mean he's up there with James Dolan and all those people, mostly because of how he treated coaches and players and all that kind of stuff too. But you know, with stink comes dirt, and so I think that a lot of players, you got a little unlucky with some signings like an Albert Hainsworth and things like that, where you spent a lot of money.
That
on
was
somebody.
him going big game hunting rather than building through the draft.
100%.
And training camp.
But I think a lot of people see him as a terrible owner and do not want to play for him.
Yeah.
I mean, they probably tell their agents, listen, if Redskins come calling, I don't want to go there with that man. There's no reason for. I mean, that, and really and truly, and you know, Mark Ellis is a huge Redskins fan as well, and he'll tell you the same thing. Is you can't like the storied tradition of the Washington Redskins has been so tainted that a generation of people, of human beings, have no idea that the Redskins were ever good.
Yeah.
When I grew up, every time the Redskins came to town, my dad's like, "We're not going to that game. We're going to lose." That was
We used to be World killers, man.
Totally.
All through the 80s and early 90s, we were world killers. And let me correct myself. Snyder bought the team in 1999. Sam Grossman had been pitching to buy the team in 1998 and had been talking to Gibbs about coming back that early and bringing back the old crew back, possibly to be in charge. Do you remember a time when the Redskins were remotely even decent?
No, no, not really. I didn't get into football until like late middle school, early high school.
Yeah.
So I think I was a latecomer to the NFL. I was.
Were you a
more
Tom
of an
Brady
NBA
jump
kid.
on? Were you a Tom Brady bandwagon guy?
Bledsoe. I think when we got Bledsoe, that's when it started. But not the early '90s teams or anything like that. I think that the Redskins just play in a tough division, man. I think if they play in the toughest division in football.
We used to win those divisions. We used that division. It was even tougher back in the 8th. The Giants were in their heyday. The Eagles were certainly competitive with Dick Vermeil and Jaworski there as quarterback.
But
Harold Carmichael.
The Redskins are never at the bottom of the league, are they? They're always like kind of contenders. They're like a 7-9 team too, right?
Constantly, but that's not what I was used to growing up, and that's fun.
Sure, I get it. I'm just saying I don't think of them as like losers. There's a lot of other franchises that I would rank below them.
Well, because we have 3 Super Bowls, right? We're not the Cleveland Browns.
But I don't even put those into like, I'm just thinking from when I started following football.
Do you remember a time when the Patriots weren't good?
No.
See? You are
because
in.
I started with Bledsoe.
Right. You are in where I was in the 80s.
Right.
And trust me, once Brady leaves,
it's going to be a scene.
Because
I'll tell you what,
when Belichick's not there,
Terry Bradshaw goes into an offseason, gets some like Bayou doctor to operate on his shoulder and his elbow. He never really throws another pass in the NFL. We're stuck with the worst quarterbacks for about 20 years. Yeah. And then finally we get Ben Roethlisberger. And, I guarantee there is people that wake up in the middle of the night screaming in terror thinking about when he retires because our cavalcade of terrible quarterbacks that have come in to back up Ben Roethlisberger and have had to come in to play because Ben is always hurt at some point in the season, play 3 or 4 games, and we're just like, pray for 500, pray for 500. And then you get somebody like Landry Jones who wins one crazy game. You're like, oh my God, he's fine. And then he throws like 9 picks in 2 games and you're like, oh God, we can't do anything. The quarterback position, there isn't a sport in the world where one position dominates everything. It moves a points line, it moves a money line. There isn't a sport in the world where one player on a team sport at least, obviously.
I like this other what if from Brian Kelly. Before we move on to our last one, what if the Browns hadn't moved to Baltimore? Belichick and company aren't fired by the Ravens, and the Patriots' reign never begins.
It's very true.
That is hypothetical.
Very, very hypothetical. And what if the Colts never leave Baltimore? I mean, do you know what I mean? Like, there's a whole thing too. The Ravens situation it's so crazy that they go from a brown and white uniform to a purple and black uniform, and all of a sudden they're Super Bowl contenders.
Right.
It's
right. And the bane of the Steelers' existence every year.
My goodness.
Damn team never can tell. Well, this one we threw on here because, Jeff rarely comes on Sports Time, but it's always fun to have him on here. Let's talk about this. What if the Patriots had gone 19-0 that year where they lost to the New York Giants in the Super Bowl thanks to Plexiglass Burris getting that catch with Eli Manning, winning that thing, I think 17-10, the David Tyree catch. So many things happened, and you could say Tom Coughlin of any coach ever in the history of the NFL owned Bill Belichick twice in the biggest game of the season. But this was the first one. The Patriots were going for that 19-0. No one, and I mean no one outside of maybe Michael Strahan saw this happening. Jeff Snyder, what if they had gone 19?
God, that was so deflating because I thought that they could have done it too. I thought that they should have done it. They were so close to doing it. I don't know what it ultimately would have meant. Like, I kind of look at the Dolphins these days and it's a little sad and pathetic.
Mercury Morris.
Right, they just keep celebrating that season.
Zonka.
So I guess I'm glad that we were spared that kind of indignity. But it would have been cool. Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say that it wouldn't have,
Do you think it would have gone down? Like, do you remember?
I'm just looking, thinking, F you.
Do you remember where you were when it? Like, where did you watch the game? Do you remember where you watched the game? What was going on?
I
like,
do.
What
I
your
remember.
reaction
I think
was?
I was probably watching with my buddy Aaron, who is a Giants fan.
Aaron Hernandez? No. Okay.
Yes, and yeah, he was rubbing it in my face. It's always tough the Giants, even though they suck, like they still scare me. Like I have PTSD.
It's amazing to me. It's amazing to me that the cities of Boston and New York have traded such barbs in every single sport.
Oh, yeah,
the
you're
rivalry is so good in every sport, and in the pantheon of at least sports when I've been alive.
Celtics Knicks, there's no real rivalry.
No, you're
there.
right. You're right. There's no. Yeah, you're 100% right. But I mean, even Bruins Rangers is a great rivalry. And if you go back to like the Phil Esposito days of the Bruins Rangers, that's some amazing hockey. But the fact that in 2 Super Bowls, the Patriots and the Giants played 2 of the most memorable games, and Boston came out the only losing Super Bowls.
Yeah.
I mean, dude.
And both of them have shocking catches.
Totally.
That turned the game or
Eli
sealed
Manning.
the game. Yeah, Eli Manning, for whatever reason, showed up against those Patriots. Yeah.
Eli Manning is quintessentially, you could compare him to Joe Namath, right? Joe Namath, well known for winning a Super Bowl, but if you look at Joe Namath's career stats, he was terrible.
Yeah.
Like his interceptions are almost the same as his touchdowns, if not more.
Right.
His passing yards. I mean, he's in the Hall of Fame for this walking out of the stadium. But really and truly, Joe Namath over his career was terrible. Same thing as Eli Manning.
Yeah.
Eli Manning early in his career, incredible quarterback, right? I mean, he was winning. He won Super Bowls. But really and truly, if you look at his regular season stats, overall, across his entire body of work, he's a pretty average quarterback.
So if they had gone 19-0, do we think that Brady, I obviously already think he is the greatest player of all time, but is he then hands down the greatest player? Like, is there no even debate?
I would say yes.
Yeah, I would say because that season was also full of a lot of tough teams in the NFL that just could not reach the level to. And I think this is the greatest year that Belichick has ever coached.
Do you think that one game leaves that question open for debate?
That's the way it goes in sports.
I think so too. And I think when the Dolphins went undefeated, the league didn't have the same kind of competition that it had in the sense of going 19-0. I mean, there's obviously 15-1 situation. Maybe that's a little of an overstep. But still, 14-0 versus 19-0. A very, very different situation.
Also, look at Shula. No one's going Shula's the greatest coach ever because he had that undefeated team. It's the body of work. And Shula coached for like 26 years.
He couldn't win a Super Bowl with Dan Marino.
Right. He could not win a Super Bowl with Dan Marino, whereas Belichick could do it with Brady all the time. And he's still doing it now, currently.
The only time you ever gave Tom Brady a superstar was Randy Moss, and he almost went undefeated.
Yep.
It's kind of a crazy stat to think about. And the almost in there is a huge asterisk, but still.
I think that's the greatest what if. What if Belichick had valued actually damn good receivers? How much better would that team have been through the history of time? Would they have beaten the Giants hands down, no problem, if he had been able to stock Tom Brady's coffers with star receivers, all-star receivers?
You have a mansion amongst a bunch of row homes year in, year out.
I know.
It's crazy.
It's interesting. Yeah. And he still does it. And I think that speaks a little bit to Belichick's ego that he has to do it himself. All right, a couple of last ones before we end this thing. What if, this is Jonathan Peck, a little bit butthurt himself. What if the Seahawks hadn't got screwed by the calls in Super Bowl 40?
I know, none of those calls were ever verified that they were bad. He scored the touchdown. It was a pass interference. Don't even give me that.
I will say,
first of all, you didn't even come close to scoring another touchdown, and you also gave up the longest run in the history of the Super Bowl.
You did.
We won that game 21-10. It wasn't like 21-20, you jagwagons. We won those games. Give me a friggin' break. Also, you could have won another Super Bowl if Pete Carroll had run Marshawn Lynch on 2 straight downs.
That's
fine.
fair point.
You can say what you want. There was 2 calls. 2 calls do not make an effing football game.
Yeah.
We scored a touchdown. Ben was clearly over the line, and it wasn't 4th down. We would have scored again. It's fine.
I'm happy that a Hasselback doesn't have a trophy, and neither does Sean Alexander. They beat my Redskins twice in the playoffs. They can F off. What if the Dolphins didn't win against the Bears in 1985? That star drew. Would the Bears have gone undefeated all the way? And I think that team certainly was possible to go undefeated.
You know what's a crazy stat too, and people in Pittsburgh will tell you this, is that the year that the Dolphins were going undefeated, right? They came to Pittsburgh, I think like 2 weeks before the playoffs, right? And so you're talking about December in Pittsburgh, and that day was it was like 71 degrees in Pittsburgh.
Right.
And the Dolphins showed up and we're like, oh my God. Like we thought we were going to get them on a cold day, get them out of the warm weather situation. And they just barely beat the Steelers, which we could have, people talk about like had the weather been different, we could have beat the Dolphins. I don't know what the F that is talking about. But the fact that the Bears lost to the Dolphins, I think it was a Monday night game.
It was a Monday night.
too.
It was huge.
Yeah.
Everybody watched. It was massive.
That to me, and that was Dan Marino. It was
Yeah,
like
it was.
second year, right?
Marino showed up and he played, and Shula defending his legacy. It was an incredible game. You could argue my 1991 Redskins could have possibly gone undefeated if we hadn't blown it against the 1-10 Cowboys at home, for God's sake, because we were looking past them and everyone was nervous about losing. So we got that loss. And of course, we lost the Eagles at the end of the year, but we were playing our third stringers in that game. So a lot of great sports what ifs. That's what makes sports so much fun. Even our mailman agrees over there.
Psyched about it.
Throwing in his stuff. I want to thank all of you for watching this episode of Collider Sports. Really appreciate you all taking the time to watch and listen to us shoot the crap about sports, as I said at the beginning of the show. It's always a joy to do all of that, and certainly even more so to do it with my panelists. I want to thank Mark Riley, who is not here, but I will thank Josh McCouga here to my left. Josh, where can they find you, man?
You can find me still angry at Rashard Mendenhall for fumbling the ball at midfield in Super Bowl 45. We were driving. We could have beat the Packers. Ben Roethlisberger threw 3 interceptions, and we still almost beat Aaron Rodgers and the Green Bay Packers. The only Super Bowl in the greatest quarterback in the NFL's history. Give me a break, Aaron. Go on The Bachelor. Next. Sorry, Jeff.
I don't have a hot take to close with. You can follow me at the Ed Snyder on Twitter, Instagram, and Cameo.
And do you have something new coming, Jeff? Some new podcast? Do you want to announce it here?
Oh my God! I will plug my new podcast, John. Stay tuned to Collider. I don't know what channel it'll be on YouTube, but the Snyder Cut. I have tricked Collider into giving me my own podcast. We had Variety's Justin Kroll on as my first guest. We dropped some interesting scooplets here and there, and some news, some rumors,
Some scooplets.
some recommendations, and
Take it easy there with
yeah.
those scoops,
Thank
ahoy.
you, John, for
Yeah,
that
of course.
opportunity.
Of course, man.
And for
I
having me
appreciate it.
today.
It's a perfect name for a podcast. I can't deny. Even though I host one called The Deep Cut, the Snyder Cut is just
Boom.
perfect. Can't deny that. All right, thanks everybody for watching. Follow me at The Rogue Says on Twitter and on Instagram for all the things I'm doing. Jesus, I was just on ET Live talking about Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. So you go find that on my Twitter as well. And if you're watching us live, stay tuned for Movie Talk coming up with me and Makuga in just a little bit as well. Thanks to Adam Smith, who always does a great job helping us out here on Sports Time. Have yourselves a great weekend, and we'll see you next week for another live episode of Collider Sports Time.